The beeping of the monitor was the only thing filling the silence between us. Bright white curtains cast a sterile glow across the hospital room, and the air stank of antiseptic and something faintly metallic. I was still hooked to the IV drip, my gown itchy against my skin, the soreness in my abdomen dull but insistent. I'd had surgery 2 days ago, and now, instead of flowers or warm words, I was getting this. I think we should separate. Brian's voice was flat, businesslike, the same tone he used when talking to interns he didn't care to remember the names of. I blinked up at him, unsure if the anesthesia was still fogging my brain. What? He didn't flinch. You heard me. I'll be staying at the condo in Back Bay. I've already moved most of my things. I swallowed. You decided all that in the last 48 hours? Bryant shrugged. Honestly, I've been planning it for months. I was waiting until your health stabilized, but now that the surgery's over, it's a logical time to make the transition. Transition. As if ending a 15-year marriage was a PowerPoint slide. I didn't answer, not yet. I kept my face blank, though I felt my pulse start to climb. Bryant mistook my silence for acceptance. He always had. He walked to the foot of the bed, pulling a folded sheet of paper from his briefcase. These are the proposed terms. I spoke to my attorney. Given that you're not working and have no consistent income, I'm offering a generous alimony package. The house will be sold, of course. I'll buy out your share. Clean break. Not working. No consistent income. I turned slowly to my phone on the tray table, ignoring him as he launched into some speech about property division. A single notification blinked on the screen. Offer confirmed, 7.3 Balker USD for patents. Global licensing deal. Final contract in your inbox. Congratulations, Elise. I tapped the message open, reading the details slowly, methodically. The licensing deal had gone through. After 4 years of quiet development, months of patent wrangling, and endless late-night strategy calls under a shell corporation Bryant didn't even know existed, it had all just landed. I felt my lips twitch. Not in joy, not even in relief, just a small, quiet curve of irony. This man, my husband, the supposed financial genius of our relationship, was walking away from a woman he thought was jobless and dependent. Do you have any questions about the proposal? He asked, his eyes already scanning the hospital's whiteboard like he had somewhere else to be. I looked up at him. Not with sadness, not anger, just clarity. No, I said softly. No questions. He nodded. Then I'll let the lawyers handle the rest. And just like that, he walked out. I stared at the closed door for a long time, the edges of the hospital room sharpening in my vision. 15 years. 15 years of pretending not to notice the small betrayals, the odd patterns, the unexplained meetings, the overcompensations, and the sudden interest in other people's children. 15 years of carefully documenting the truth I already knew. Not about me, about him. He thought he was leaving me behind. But he had no idea he'd just lit the fuse, and I was done pretending not to see the fire. Back then, I was broke. Not quirky broke or post-grad lazy, just plain broke. I was 22, living off cold brew and instant noodles, sharing a crumbling Somerville apartment with 2 girls I barely knew. Most of my days were spent interning at an architectural firm that paid in exposure and coffee shop vouchers. Nights, I'd sneak into this underground co-working hub in Boston, a damp, windowless basement with bad Wi-Fi and even worse lighting. But it had long tables, hot outlets, and silence. That was enough. I always sat at the corner table, far from the door, closest to the busted radiator. I'd spread out my sketch pads, old floor plans, and half-broken mechanical pencils, and just dream. Floating cities, reimagined subway systems, carbon-positive buildings that pulsed like living things. No one ever looked twice at me, which was exactly how I liked it. Until he did. I remember the first time I saw Bryant. It was raining hard that night, and he stepped inside like he owned the air. Tailored coat, leather laptop bag. The kind of man who didn't ask permission before taking up space. He paused at the entry, shook the water from his collar, then scanned the room. And just like that, his eyes landed on my table. You drew that? He asked, pointing at one of my sketches, a sleek vertical village stacked like a DNA helix, with parks and glass catwalks spiraling around the core. I froze, halfway through shading a corner window. I nodded slowly. It's a housing concept for dense urban cores. The goal's to minimize land use and still. He smiled, interrupting me in the way confident people do. I love it. It looks like something that'd get you hired in Tokyo tomorrow. I laughed under my breath, unsure if he was mocking me. I'm still an intern. They mostly have me formatting stairwell specs. He pulled out the chair across from me. I'm Bryant. Elise, I replied cautiously. He looked over my scattered notes, like he wasn't in a rush to be anywhere else. You ever think about monetizing this stuff? I blinked. What, like selling sketches? No, I mean scaling it. Something modular. You have a mind for systems. What if your buildings weren't just ideas? What if they were tools? That was the first time anyone had ever said that to me. He talked fast. Buzzwords, strategy, vision. Words I'd only ever heard from startup guys on podcasts. But something about the way he said them made me feel like they belonged to me too. Like I could build something bigger than my sketchbook. By the time the place closed, we were still talking about cities, data, infrastructure. He told me about his consulting work, how he'd just wrapped a gig helping a small firm design a smart district in Montreal. He spun out an idea for a platform that could help urban developers visualize zoning overlays and sustainability benchmarks in real time. I listened, wide-eyed. You know, he said as we were leaving, you should build an app around this modeling stuff. You've already got the bones. You just need the right packaging. I laughed, but something in me sparked. He wasn't wrong. That night, after I got home and microwaved leftover rice, I opened my laptop and made a folder. I named it E2X Prototype, Phase 0. It was clunky and misspelled and had no funding and no team, but it was mine. I had no idea then that it would become the foundation of an empire, but I did know this. Bryant saw me, or at least he saw something useful, and that felt dangerously close to love. The first year felt like a dream. We went from brainstorming in dim coffee shops to strolling through clean, curated museum exhibits on Sundays. Bryant always bought the tickets in advance, timed entries, 0 lines. We'd wander through city planning retrospectives and talk about how urban density was just misunderstood potential. He made everything feel like it had a purpose. Even the way he touched my elbow when crossing the street seemed strategic, like part of some broader plan. But it wasn't cold, it was controlled. And back then, I found that comforting. We went to rooftop dinners downtown, fancy ones where the menu didn't list prices, and everyone pretended to love the taste of foam. Bryant knew the waiters by name. I kept the napkin from our third date in my sketchbook. He said we should build a life that mattered, that people who talked about changing the world rarely did. That action came from design, and design came from vision. And God, he made me believe in mine. He was the one who encouraged me to pitch the modeling app concept to a few professors. He even helped me register a domain. I didn't know what I was doing, but he said that didn't matter. The people who look like they know what they're doing are just better at pretending, he told me once over ramen. His tie tossed on the seat beside him. We got married less than 2 years later at his parents' lakeside estate in New Hampshire. It was small and green and expensive looking in that effortless New England way. My mother cried the entire ceremony, not out of joy exactly, but confusion. She'd always been wary of how fast Bryant moved, how polished he was, but he wore her down with charm and talk of our bright future. And at the time, I thought she was just being difficult. He built me a studio a month after we moved into the house, took over the garage, gutted it himself on weekends, designed it with white walls, cork floors, and a huge north-facing window. So you can get the good light, he said, hammer in hand like some startup version of a husband from a home renovation show. It became my sanctuary. That's where I started picking up freelance projects. Light stuff, renderings, early-stage concept support, sustainability mock-ups. Enough to pay for software upgrades and the occasional Uber Eats spree. I created an LLC mostly for tax purposes, or so I told him. Really, it was because I liked watching the business account grow. Quietly, separately. Bryant always referred to himself as the breadwinner. You're the artist, he'd say, proud of it. You don't need to worry about income. So I didn't correct him. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I liked having something that was just mine, not ours, not his, mine. Looking back, that studio didn't just house my work. It housed the first brick in a wall I didn't know I was building, the one that would later keep me standing when everything else came crashing down. It started like any other potluck at Logan and Sierra's: linen napkins, mismatched vintage plates, a playlist full of ambient jazz no one really listened to. Bryant brought his usual handcrafted sourdough and a bottle of something French with an unreadable label. I made mushroom risotto and tried not to obsess over whether I'd added too much salt. By the time we sat down to eat, the backyard lights had come on, strung between the trees like a Pinterest board. Sierra raised her glass for a toast, her cheeks flushed from wine or nerves, or maybe both. "So," she said, resting one hand over her stomach, "I guess now's a good time to say it. We're having a baby." There was a pause, then the table erupted in clinking glasses and overlapping congratulations. Logan smiled in that quiet way he always did, proud but distant. Bryant's reaction hit like a thunderclap. "Oh my God," he exclaimed, jumping up from his seat and wrapping Sierra in a dramatic hug that lifted her halfway off the ground. "You're glowing. This is incredible." I watched as he held her hands a moment too long, then started firing off questions like he was leading a press conference. "How far along? Do you know the gender yet? Have you picked names?" Even Logan couldn't hide the discomfort then. He kept glancing at Bryant with that polite but tight expression men use when something's off but no one said it aloud yet. The rest of us laughed awkwardly, sipping wine, passing plates. Bryant sat down again, still beaming, and put a hand on Logan's shoulder. "You know this baby's basically our first little one in the circle, right? Like our honorary godchild or something." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. He kept going. "We've all known each other since our first jobs, remember? Our little crew. This kid's gonna grow up surrounded by so much love. Aunt Elise, Uncle Bryant. It's perfect." Sierra gave a tight smile. "Well, we're still figuring things out." Later, on the drive home, I watched the way Bryant stared out the window like he was still in that backyard, basking in someone else's milestone. "She's only 8 weeks, I said quietly. He didn't answer right away. "She'll need support," he finally said. "Logan's great, but Sierra's going to want someone who really understands wellness planning, maternity options, stress reduction." I kept both hands on the wheel. "You're acting like this baby's yours," I said. He turned to me, eyebrows raised, almost amused. "Don't be ridiculous. I'm just excited. We're all close. It's a big deal." I nodded slowly, saying nothing more, but I wasn't imagining the shift. The way he looked at Sierra that night, like she was carrying something sacred. The way his voice softened when he said, "our first little one in the circle." The way Logan, usually unbothered by anything, barely touched his plate after that. No one else seemed to notice, but I did. And it stayed with me long after the risotto was forgotten. At first, it was subtle. Bryant offered to help Sierra build a pregnancy tracker spreadsheet to monitor her hydration, steps, and nutrient intake. He texted her articles about prenatal yoga and downloaded a sleep monitoring app for her that he insisted on tweaking the settings on. I thought it was odd, sure, but maybe he was just excited. Maybe this was just Bryant being Bryant, intensely helpful when it came to optimizing other people's lives. But then he started skipping our Sunday brunches to walk Sierra through insurance options. He sat on Zoom calls with her doula, compared stroller specs like he was prepping for a product launch, took her grocery shopping so she wouldn't carry anything too heavy. One afternoon, I walked into the living room and found him assembling a customized smoothie guide labeled Baby Fuel on Canva. I watched from the hallway while he added clip art bananas next to protein ratios. That was the same week I had my second biopsy. He didn't come to that appointment. When I brought it up later, he said he didn't realize it was that serious. Then, he quit caffeine and alcohol. Not for me, not even for himself. For Sierra, he explained, almost proudly. She's going caffeine-free, and I thought, why not join her? Solidarity, it's kind of symbolic, right? Symbolic. I asked him once if he'd help me organize my prescription schedule. My symptoms had started flaring, and brain fog was becoming a problem. He said he'd try, but was already juggling Sierra's nutrition updates. I stopped asking after that. He started saying things like, "We have to be thinking long-term for her," Or, she needs consistency right now. We can't let stress impact the baby. We, not Logan, not even Sierra. We. I waited until one quiet night, while he stood at the sink meticulously slicing cucumbers for her hydration jars, to ask the question that had been forming in my throat like a stone. Are you planning to be this child's father? He dropped the knife. The sound was sharp, metallic, final. What the hell does that mean? He snapped, rounding on me. It means, I said, voice steady. You're acting like you're not just helping a friend. You're building a family, with her. And I want to know what that makes me. His jaw clenched. It makes you petty, insecure, emotionally cold. Do you even hear yourself right now? I hear you, I said quietly, loud and clear. That was the night he moved into the guest room. He told me I was impossible to talk to, that I'd let jealousy poison my perspective, that he couldn't be in a marriage where his kindness was turned into accusations. We stopped pretending after that. He had his routines, meal preps for Sierra, doctor visits, yoga sign-ups. I stopped checking his calendar. I stopped inviting him to mine. My health got worse. The doctors still didn't have a name for it, just markers and fatigue and flare-ups that kept getting longer. But my work, that took off like a rocket. While Bryant ran around acting like a part-time doula, I was quietly closing funding rounds, finalizing patent protections, and onboarding developers. All through my LLC, all in stealth. I worked from my studio most days. Gray hoodie, electrolytes, compression gloves on my worst mornings. But the focus came easy. So did the growth. It was like all the love I couldn't put into my marriage had found a new home. He didn't notice, he didn't ask, and I didn't offer. We were two people sleeping in separate rooms, orbiting different worlds, pretending the center hadn't already collapsed. The house was quiet, but I wasn't. Not inside. Inside, I was planning, watching, building. Because this wasn't grief anymore, it was preparation. It was close to midnight when I heard the knock. 3 sharp raps, then a pause. I knew it wasn't Bryant. He never came to my townhouse anymore unless he needed a charger or something from the storage closet. I opened the door and found Logan standing there, rain-soaked, holding a tablet like it was an evidence file. I didn't know where else to go, he said quietly. I stepped aside and motioned him in. He didn't sit, just handed me the tablet and waited. It took about 10 seconds for the pieces to start connecting. A GPS map, dotted with date-stamped location pings. All centered around a boutique business hotel in Brookline. Monday nights, Wednesday mornings, Friday evenings. Then came the receipts. Room 412. Sierra's name on one, Bryant's on the other. Overlapping check-ins. Photos. One of Bryant waiting outside the hotel in his navy quarter zip. Another of him adjusting the stroller in the back of Sierra's car, long before her due date. Logan had been documenting everything. I started noticing about 6 months ago, he said. Her calendar didn't match up with mine anymore. She started having needs, business lunches, appointments, but they always lined up with his availability. I didn't ask why he hadn't come sooner. I understood. We weren't in the crying phase of betrayal. We were long past that. We sat side by side on the couch, not touching, not even making eye contact, just scrolling through 2 years of orchestrated deceit. They used hotel Wi-Fi to message each other, he said. Private app. I traced it through her iPad backup. Look at the nicknames. I did. He was Bree Bree. She was Mama Bear Bo01. I felt nothing, just a strange clinical detachment. I think Logan felt the same. What are you going to do? I asked. He shrugged. Document it. Wait, I'm not blowing up my daughter's life over these two. I nodded. Same. We made a pact that night. Quiet, steady, strategic. We would collect everything, preserve it like forensic scientists. If the truth had to come out, it would come out on our terms, when the child could handle it, when the damage could be directed, not detonated. From that point on, I started watching more carefully. When Bryant came home late, I didn't ask. When he made excuses about company dinners or Sierra's rough days, I just nodded. He never noticed the way I stopped engaging. Or maybe he didn't care. Either way, it gave me space to build. While he played house in hotel rooms, I expanded my company in silence, recruited a back-end dev team out of Copenhagen, patented a modular zoning algorithm that made urban simulation models 20 times faster. Partnered with a clean tech firm in Toronto for ESG compliance layering. I was busy, focused, cold, maybe, but I preferred that to being destroyed. People think betrayal is a bomb, but sometimes it's a blueprint, and I had every intention of building something unstoppable from the ruins. 3 years of quiet maneuvering, 3 years of screenshots, copies, cold stares, and separate beds. That's how long I waited. That's how long I played the role of the oblivious, unambitious wife. And then my body gave out. The official diagnosis came in waves: autoimmune, systemic inflammation, fatigue, organ flare-ups. I spent a week in and out of tests before they finally admitted me. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was life-altering. And still, Bryant barely showed up. He came on the second day, dropped off a charger and a bottle of green juice, stayed for 15 minutes, then left to help Sierra with daycare transition stress. I wasn't surprised. I didn't even cry. I just opened my laptop and sent the final documents to my attorney. By the third day, I was used to the rhythms of the room, the nurse's rounds, the drowsy lull of IV meds, the way the hallway light flickered every time the elevator ran. So when they entered, Bryant and Sierra side by side like smug corporate reps, it felt almost theatrical. Bryant wore a navy blazer. Sierra had on lipstick. She stayed near the door while he walked up to my bed, pulled a white envelope from his leather folder, and dropped it onto my tray like he was delivering a menu. "I think this is overdue," he said smoothly. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. His expression said everything: confident, prepared, detached. "I've already spoken with my lawyer," he continued. "Given your health and situation, I'm willing to be generous. I'm not looking to hurt you, Elise. I just think it's time we both moved on." Sierra shifted behind him, hands resting casually on her now flat stomach, glancing around the room like it was beneath her. "You'll get a monthly alimony. I've proposed buying out your share of the house. There's also a clause for your medical expenses. We can negotiate that." I stared at him for a long moment. Then I reached for my phone. He tilted his head. "Now's really not the time for—" I held up one finger. The screen lit up. Final confirmation. Bryant and Cooper residence deed transferred. LLC property trust complete. I smiled. Then another message buzzed in. Media assets filed. App expansion contracts cleared for EU and South Korea. And then another. Eviction notice signed. Will deliver in person or certified mail. Bryant was still talking. "You've never worked a traditional job," he said, arms crossed like a teacher disappointed in a student. "We both know I've carried the financial weight of this household. I just hope you'll be realistic." I met his gaze, calm, unblinking. "You're right," I said softly. "You have carried something." He blinked. "Excuse me. My name, my house, my silence." Sierra shifted, eyes narrowing. "You don't have to make this ugly." "Oh, but I do," I said, reaching over and pressing the intercom. "Nurse, could you escort my guests out? I'm feeling tired." They didn't move at first, so I leaned back and added, "Also, kindly let them know they'll need to find new housing by next Friday. Ownership has changed." Bryant's mouth opened, then closed. The envelope was still on my tray when they left. I never touched it. That night, I slept better than I had in years. My lawyer filed everything the next morning: the divorce, the eviction, the cease and desist for Bryant's unauthorized use of my IP in one of his firm's recent decks. I had been patient. I had been quiet. But now it was my turn. The studio he once built for me. I walked in there 2 weeks later with a team of designers and rebranded it into headquarters. His name had been on everything for years: leases, checks, dinner party RSVPs. But the only name that mattered now was mine. They lasted 6 days at a hotel before reality hit. After that, Bryant and Sierra had no choice but to pack up their new life and move into the one place they swore they'd never need: his parents' estate in Marblehead. It was poetic, really. The man who once hosted wine tastings in our backyard, now sleeping in his childhood bedroom, beneath a framed high school soccer jersey and a poster of Reagan. The woman who used to send me passive-aggressive Pinterest boards for elegant nursery aesthetics, now sharing a bathroom with her lover's mother. I waited until they were well settled into that domestic downgrade before making my move. Logan and I arrived on a Friday afternoon. Sunny, clear, warm. The kind of day perfect for unraveling someone's carefully constructed fantasy. We pulled up to the circular driveway in silence. The front door was already open. Inside, Bryant's mother sat stiffly on the settee, hands clasped in her lap like she was bracing for impact. She didn't greet us. She just nodded once. Sierra was in the kitchen. Her daughter, 16 now, stood beside her, arms crossed. She looked more like Logan than ever. Bryant came down the stairs in sweatpants. No blazer, no smirk. Just tired eyes and a faint sense that maybe he didn't control the narrative anymore. "Why are you here?" he asked, like we weren't all already living inside the fallout of his choices. "We wanted to set the record straight," Logan said. I stood back and let him speak. It wasn't my story to tell first. Logan turned to Sierra's daughter. "I know this has been confusing," he said gently, "but you deserve the truth." She nodded, silent, steady. "Sierra and I," he continued, "were never officially divorced. We separated. She told people we'd filed, but legally, we're still married." Bryant stepped forward. "That's not possible. We had a—" "There was no finalized decree," Logan interrupted. "We checked. It never went through. Which means your marriage to her? Never valid." Sierra opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her daughter turned toward her slowly. "You lied," the girl said. "You lied to me, to everyone." "I was trying to protect you," Sierra said weakly. "I didn't want to complicate things." "But you did," her daughter replied. "You made everything worse." Logan reached into his folder and passed the girl a copy of the court documents. "You don't have to make any decisions now. Just know, if you ever need the truth, I'll give it to you. All of it." Then it was my turn. I stepped forward, pulled out my phone, and placed it face up on the table. My homepage loaded to the front page of Tech Forward's upcoming feature. Elise Kincaid, the woman behind the cities of tomorrow. Subhead: her app redefined urban modeling. Now Netflix wants her story. Bryant stared at the screen like it might bite him. "I made 7 figures last quarter," I said calmly. "That's without touching international licensing or the documentary deal. I own the house you were evicted from. I own the code you once called a hobby. I own my time now." No one spoke. "I was never dependent on you," I continued. "You just never cared to look past your own reflection." I picked up my phone. Logan nodded at the daughter and offered a small smile before we turned to leave. At the door, I paused. "Your throne was made of sand, Bryant. All I did was let the tide roll in." And with that, we walked out. The empire he tried to build on betrayal had finally collapsed. And I wasn't standing in the rubble. I was watching it from above. Bryant's father didn't speak to him for a full week after the confrontation. The consultancy, once practically guaranteed to Bryant as a legacy, quietly removed his profile from their website. A week later, he was offered a junior analyst role at a mid-sized startup in Somerville. No corner office, no travel perks, no staff, just a shared desk, a headset, and a login for training videos. The company specialized in green construction audits, ironically, a field I helped disrupt 3 years prior. I heard through a mutual contact he tried name-dropping me in his interview. Didn't go over well. Sierra didn't fare much better. The local firm she worked with dropped her without notice after the news circulated. Turns out, executive consultant doesn't hold much weight when your name trends in Google searches next to the words invalid marriage and custody fraud. With no legal grounds to fight Logan's parental rights and no financial footing, she lost full custody in under 6 weeks. Her visits became supervised, tightly scheduled, closely monitored. She complained to friends, but most of them had already drifted away. The potluck circle was over. No one wanted to toast Prosecco next to that kind of wreckage. And me, I was thriving in silence. I bought out the final investor in my company, a quiet, clean transfer that gave me 100% control. No board, no need for approval. Just me, my team, and a whiteboard full of ideas. Then I gutted the house. Bryant's fingerprints were on too many things. The kitchen layout, the furniture, the artwork he insisted we hang. So I tore it all out. Rebuilt the space into something functional, bold, modular. Half residential, half workspace. It finally felt like mine. Every night I locked up with the same small smile. not of revenge, but of release. One Saturday afternoon, there was a knock at the door. It was Sierra's daughter, alone. She held a folder and looked nervous, unsure if I'd slam the door or call her mother. I didn't do either. I just wanted to say, she started, looking down. I'm sorry, for everything, for what she did, what he did. I know none of that's my fault, but still. I stepped aside and let her in. We sat in the new kitchen, across from each other like two women trying to salvage something from the rubble. She handed me the folder. Inside were transcripts, essays, travel logs, all in Korean, Japanese, and German. I want to help, she said. If you're still expanding overseas, I'm fluent in all three. I've been studying linguistics. I want to be part of something that matters. I nodded slowly. We weren't family, not really. But there was a kind of honesty in her I hadn't seen in years. Maybe it came from watching her mother lie. Maybe it came from watching me survive it. Either way, I gave her a trial project. She smiled. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like something new was starting. Clean, strong, and entirely mine to build. The sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new office. Real sunlight. Not the harsh fluorescence I used to work under in that crumbling Somerville internship back when this all began. Everything felt warm, still, earned. I stood barefoot on the concrete floor, sipping mint tea, watching contractors install the final touches on the facade. The last metal letters slid into place slowly, carefully. The L.M. Kincaid Center for Urban Futures. My grandmother's name. The woman who used to trace building silhouettes on napkins while waiting for the bus. She never lived to see any of this, but she was the first person who believed I'd designed something that mattered. Behind me, Logan stepped into the room. He didn't say anything at first, just walked to the edge of the open window frame and stared out over the Boston skyline. Feels different, he said finally. It is, I replied. We hadn't labeled what we were to each other. There'd been no grand declarations. Just years of partnership built on quiet trust, shared silences, and brutal honesty. I'd stopped believing in fairy tales a long time ago, but I believed in him. He pulled something out of his messenger bag. Not a ring, not flowers, just a document folder. He placed it on my desk. What's this? I asked. A proposal, he said with a small smile. Not the diamond kind. This one's for a shared platform, your modeling framework paired with my civic engagement tool. Real-time voter data layered over zoning maps. Policy meets design. I flipped through the first few pages. It was smart, detailed, grounded, like everything he did. This isn't a pitch, he added. It's a partnership. I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm asking if we can build something permanent, together, business, life, whatever form it takes. I looked at him, at the man who showed up late one night with a tablet full of betrayal, and stayed through every phase of the cleanup, who never once asked for credit, who believed me even when I had nothing left but instinct. I'm not ready to say yes, I said honestly. He nodded. I figured. Just keep it on your desk. I set the folder down next to my tea. I don't know what the future looks like, I told him. But I know what it doesn't look like anymore. He gave a soft laugh. That's a start. We stood there for a while, not needing to fill the space with anything more. Outside, the final drill word, and then silence. The crew stepped back and gave me a thumbs up through the glass. It was done. The building stood tall, sleek, minimal, just like the first model I sketched all those years ago at the gallery table. Only now, it was real. And mine. I pressed my hand to the cool edge of the logo and whispered, "We made it, Grandma." Not just out of something, but into something. Finally, I had redesigned everything, on my terms,